They say time heals everything, but whoever said that never had to move into their grown child's house and pretend it still felt like home. My name's Annie Longroove, 64 years old, retired nurse, stroke survivor, and lately a woman learning the hard way that kindness without caution can ruin you. Now, let's start from the day I arrived at my son's house. The sky was gray that morning, the kind that made you feel like God hadn't decided whether to bless the day or curse it. Noah had come to pick me up from my old place, my place, the house I'd lived in for 35 years. I remember the sound of the front door closing behind me. It felt like something permanent had ended, but I didn't have the words for it then. He smiled, said, "You won't have to lift a finger, Ma. Keisha's already set up your room. You'll love it." I nodded, holding my purse tighter. My heart was willing to believe him. My spirit wasn't. By the time we got to their home in Stonecrest, Keisha was waiting on the porch, camera in hand, phone already recording. "Look at my sweet mother-in-law," she said, voice dripping honey. "Fresh out the hospital, still glowing. We so blessed, y'all." She swung that camera toward me, and I gave a small smile, not for her followers, but to keep peace. I've learned that quiet is sometimes the only weapon old women get to use. Later that evening, she posted the video with a caption, #family-love, #caregiver-life, #grateful. The comments poured in, strangers calling her an angel, telling her how beautiful it was to care for an elder. I wanted to believe it was genuine. For about 5 minutes, I did. She served dinner on white plates that looked like they'd never seen real food before. Noah talked business. Keisha scrolled on her phone, and I sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The only thing in that house that seemed to notice I was still breathing. For a few weeks, I tried to be grateful. I told myself the stiffness in Keisha's tone was just nerves, that her distance was respect, not disgust. But soon, I started noticing little things, the way she talked to me with her phone in hand, eyes darting between me and her screen like I was a scene she needed to skip. One afternoon, I caught her filming me while I napped on the couch. She said she wanted to post a sweet candid, but when I watched the clip later, the caption read, "When your Emile moves in and takes over your couch, LOL." The comments laughed. Some called me cute. Others said, "Girl, I could never." I told Noah I didn't like it. He sighed, said, "She's just having fun, Ma. Don't take it personal." But I did, because every time I saw that camera, I knew I was being turned into content. My age, my frailty, my existence turned into someone's performance of kindness. When I wasn't being filmed, I stayed quiet. I rearranged my drawers, folded towels, tried to feel useful. I even started keeping a small notebook where I wrote down what I noticed. It wasn't spiteful, just something to help me make sense of what was happening. Because deep down, something in that house didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way Keisha locked her office door whenever I walked by, or how Noah's tone softened around her, but sharpened around me. Or maybe it was just the silence that grew thicker each night, the kind of silence that feels planned. One morning, I decided to check my mail. Keisha had said she was handling my bills, but I wanted to see them myself. I reached for my purse, the same one I'd carried for years, and started going through my documents. That's when I noticed it. One of my old bank statements, the one from the sale of my house, was gone. Not misplaced. Gone. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to, because when you've lived long enough, you learn that danger doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it shows up wearing perfume, holding a ring light, and smiling in your face. So I zipped my purse, sat back down, and whispered to myself, I see you. And from that day, I stopped being just a guest in that house. I started watching. They started calling it boundaries. That's how every small cruelty begins, dressed up in pretty language. Keisha said it so gently that first morning I almost believed her. Mom, we just want you to have structure. She smiled, handing me a printed schedule of my own day, breakfast at 8, rest at 10, no phone calls after dinner. A woman who'd barely known me 3 years was now mapping out when I should sleep. At first, I laughed it off. Sweetheart, I've been scheduling people's medications longer than you've been alive. I try to keep it light, but the way she smiled back, patient, pitying, told me she wasn't joking. Noah stood behind her, nodding. It's just temporary, Mom. For your recovery. Recovery. The word sat in my chest like lead. My body was healing fine. It was my peace that was starting to limp. For the first few weeks, I played along. Keisha would bring my pills and hover until I swallowed them. If I wanted to step outside, she'd insist on coming along. When the nurse stopped by, she'd position herself nearby, pretending to tidy up, really just listening. It wasn't long before my phone started acting strange. A few missed calls from my friend Dolores never showed up until hours later. When I asked Noah, he said the phone company was probably updating their system. But one night, as I dozed off in the living room, I heard the soft chime of my phone in Keisha's hand. She was scrolling through it, her face lit by the glow. She didn't see me watching. The next morning, I checked my call log. 3 numbers were blocked, including Dolores's. I didn't confront her right away. I just unblocked them and waited. That evening, when Dolores called, Keisha answered. Oh, hi, Miss Dolores. Annie's resting right now. She gets tired easily, you know how it is. Then she hung up. That's when I realized Keisha had turned my recovery into a cage, and Noah had given her the keys. Still, I kept my voice soft. No one listens to an older woman when she sounds angry. They call it confusion or mood swings. So I played my part, quiet, grateful, harmless. I let her believe I didn't notice. But I watched. Keisha's mother, Lorna, began visiting more often, always unannounced, always with something to say about how we were managing me. She'd waltz in like she owned the place, rearranging my things on the mantel, inspecting my food. This house is really coming together. She'd hum, side-eyeing me like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out. You're lucky, Annie. Not every woman your age has a family willing to help. I smiled politely, but my hands tightened around my teacup until it almost cracked. Sometimes I'd catch Noah and Keisha whispering near the staircase. When I'd walk in, they'd go silent. Keisha would plaster on that sugary smile again. Everything okay, Mama Annie? Mama Annie, the same name she used online when she wanted likes. But something changed one Saturday. Lorna came over again, wearing her usual perfume. Heavy, floral, suffocating. I was in the hallway, folding towels, when I heard voices from the kitchen. She's not improving like we thought, Keisha whispered. Lorna's voice was low, firm. You can't have your whole life revolve around her. You and Noah need your space. You said by summer. Keisha sighed. Yeah, we just need her gone by summer. The words didn't hit me all at once. They crept in, cold and slow. Gone by summer. I stood there, holding a towel that suddenly felt heavy as a stone. When Noah came into the hallway, he looked surprised to see me standing there. "Mom, you okay?" I forced a smile, just a little dizzy. My voice didn't tremble, though my hands did. He reached for the towels, and I let him take them. Keisha peeked from the kitchen, her expression unreadable. That night, I lay awake long after the house went quiet. The clock glowed 2:14 a.m. in the dark, and all I could hear was the whisper of that phrase again. Gone by summer. If she wanted me gone, she'd have to work harder than that. Because what they didn't know was that I'd stopped being the frail old woman they thought they were managing. No, I was watching now. Waiting. And for the first time since moving in, I wasn't scared anymore. I was curious. Curious what they'd do next, and how far they'd go to get rid of me. There's a kind of cruelty that doesn't shout. It just rearranges things. A plate here, a tone there, until you start questioning your own footing. That's how Keisha did it, with softness. It began one Sunday afternoon. I'd been up early, seasoning chicken the way my mother taught me, slow, patient, no shortcuts. I wanted to surprise Noah, maybe remind him of home before everything got so modern. The smell filled the house with something warm. But before I could set the table, Keisha breezed in wearing a floral dress and that same phone in her hand. "Oh, Mama Annie," she chirped. "You cooked? I wish you'd told me. I already ordered from that new place downtown." She placed 2 white catering trays on the counter, like she was presenting trophies. Noah came in just then, grinning. "Babe, you didn't have to," but when he saw her smile, he stopped mid-sentence. "That's thoughtful," he said. Thoughtful. They unpacked the food while mine cooled on the stove, untouched. When I tried to offer a taste, Keisha laughed. "We can warm it up tomorrow, Mama Annie. You shouldn't strain yourself like this." So we ate from plastic containers that night. My food went into the fridge, never to be seen again. That was the first quiet humiliation. The next came in a smaller bottle, my blood pressure pills. One morning, the bottle wasn't on my nightstand. Keisha said she'd tidied the room. "I'll find it, don't worry." 2 days later, it turned up inside a bathroom cabinet behind a box of hair dye. The second time, I found them in the laundry basket. When I mentioned it to Noah, he gave me that look, half concern, half disbelief. "Mom, maybe you put them there. With your stroke, sometimes." I cut him off. "Sometimes what?" He hesitated, then kissed my forehead. "Never mind." That kiss stung more than any slap could. It was the kind people give when they've already decided you're fragile. I started marking the dates when my things went missing. My pills, a shawl, my church shoes. I'd write it all down in a notebook hidden under my pillow. Keisha thought she was managing me. She didn't realize I was collecting her patterns. Then came the gossip. Mrs. Davis, the neighbor across the street, caught me one afternoon as I was trimming the small patch of roses near the fence. She's one of those women who always talks like she knows something. "How are you doing over there, Annie?" she asked, squinting against the sun. I smiled. "Can't complain." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "I was looking through some property records the other day. Did you know your name isn't on the house?" I blinked. "What?" "Oh, I just assumed it would be. I saw 3 names on the file, your son, his wife, and her mother. That woman got her name on everything." I froze, the shears trembling in my hand. "Her mother?" She nodded. "That's what I saw. You didn't know." I forced a smile, The kind you use to hide a storm. Guess I didn't. Mrs. Davis patted my arm. You take care now, honey. When she left, I stayed by the roses, the sun burning on my back, my mind spinning through every decision I'd made since the stroke. I'd sold my home, trusted Noah with the money, believed Keisha's talk about fresh starts and family investments. 3 names, hers, his, and hers again, but not mine. That night, I couldn't eat. I moved through the house like a ghost, hearing my own footsteps echo on their polished floors. Keisha laughed from the living room, the sound of some reality show blending with Noah's low voice. I sat at the dining table with a pen and my notebook, the same one where I tracked her little manipulations. I turned to a new page and wrote down every word Mrs. Davis had said, careful and deliberate. That woman got her name on everything. The ink bled slightly into the paper. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Then I folded the page neatly, slid it into the back of the notebook, and whispered to myself, we'll see about that. Some people fight with noise. I learned to fight by remembering, and I never forget. The house was dressed up like a magazine spread that evening, silver chargers, long candles, and music soft enough to sound expensive. It was their anniversary dinner. Keisha had planned it for weeks, reminding me daily that it was going to be a refined evening. I wore my best blue dress, the one Noah said once made me look like his grandmother. A compliment, I think. My hands trembled a little as I set the serving bowls down. Keisha had insisted I make the macaroni and greens because, as she said, they'll add that old school flavor. I didn't miss the tone behind the smile. Guests began to arrive around 6. Her mother, Lorna, came in first, tall, jeweled, smelling of roses and entitlement. Oh, Annie, she said, her eyes running over me like I was a misbuttoned shirt. You're still helping in the kitchen? How sweet. Miss Dolores from my church had come at my invitation. She brought a cobbler and that quiet dignity that never leaves her. Evenin', baby, she whispered, squeezing my hand. You all right? I nodded, though my throat was already tightening. When we sat down, Keisha took the head of the table beside Noah, another small rearrangement of power. The laughter rolled mostly from her side. Lorna had a way of turning every sentence into an announcement. So, Lorna said, raising her glass halfway, it's been a beautiful 2 years for you both. And what a home you've made. Truly elegant. I told Keisha it's the kind of place she deserves. I looked at Noah, expecting some small correction. Maybe a word of balance. But he only smiled faintly and reached for the wine bottle. The food was passed around, plates filled, and for a brief moment I thought maybe, just maybe, we could get through the night without incident. But God has a way of revealing what needs to be seen. It started when Lorna tasted my macaroni and frowned. This is interesting, she said. Keisha laughed. Mama, don't start. No, Lorna said, waving her fork. It's just people cook differently when they get older. You lose your touch a bit. My chest burned. I tried to swallow the anger rising in me, but then Keisha leaned forward with that sweet, venomous tone of hers. Mama Annie does her best, she said, smiling for the table. But honestly, even on her worst day, my mother is better than you. The room froze. For a heartbeat, all I heard was the faint hum of the refrigerator and Miss Dolores' quiet gasp. Noah stared at his plate, motionless. My fork slipped from my fingers, clattering against the china. Keisha didn't even flinch. Lorna chuckled, that low, satisfied sound that told me this wasn't her daughter's first cruelty. Now, Keisha, Lorna said, touching her arm, don't embarrass the poor woman. She's family. The poor woman. I could feel Miss Dolores's eyes on me, steady and sad. She didn't speak, but her silence screamed everything my heart couldn't yet form. I looked at Noah. He didn't move, didn't defend me, just kept his gaze fixed on the wine, like it was something holy. I rose slowly, pushing my chair back, so gently the legs barely made a sound. Every eye turned toward me. My napkin was still folded neatly on my lap. I lifted it, dabbed the corner of my mouth, and laid it on the table. You know, I said, voice calm as still water. You're right, Keisha. Her smirk widened. Well, but the thing about worse days, I continued, is that they don't last forever. Her smile faltered, just a hair. Your worst days, I said, standing tall, are about to begin. No one breathed. The clock ticked loud in the silence. Lorna's laughter stopped mid-breath. Miss Dolores gave a small nod, not approval, but recognition. The kind women give when they know you've just chosen to stop being quiet. I turned and walked toward the kitchen. Behind me, voices stumbled. Noah's whisper, Keisha sputtered, "What's that supposed to mean?" But I didn't look back. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter to steady myself. My pulse pounded hard enough to feel in my throat, but there was no regret, only clarity. Through the reflection in the glass cabinet, I saw the dining table, the woman who took my son's voice, her mother sitting like a queen, and the man I'd raised sitting mute beside them. And beside them all, a witness, Miss Dolores, still watching quietly, her hand resting on the untouched cobbler. The storm had started, and this time I wasn't the one trembling. I woke before sunrise, the house still heavy with sleep and last night's ugliness. The plates from the anniversary dinner were stacked in the sink like relics of a battlefield. I didn't bother cleaning them. Some messes weren't meant to be cleaned. They were meant to be walked away from. I dressed quietly, one piece of clothing at a time. My hands shook a little as I buttoned my cardigan. There was no note, no explanation, just the stillness of a woman who'd finally made up her mind. I slipped out the side door, the one that creaked less, and stepped into the cold morning air. The sky was gray, fitting. When I reached the bus stop, my breath fogged in front of me. I had $47 in my purse and a set of keys that no longer opened peace, but they do. The driver gave me a look when I handed him cash. Early start, huh? He said. Late ending, I replied. Miss Dolores opened her door like she'd been waiting for me. No questions, just that same firm embrace she used to give the women at church who came in crying. You don't owe me an explanation, baby, she said, but you will owe yourself some rest. Her house smelled like lemon and cedar polish. She had a pot of coffee waiting. I sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around the mug, feeling the first quiet I'd known in months. My reflection in the window looked older, but steadier, the kind of tired that doesn't break you, just reshapes you. By mid-morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Keisha's name flashed across the screen, then Noah's, then an unknown number. I turned it face down, but by noon, I couldn't help myself. I opened Facebook. There she was, Keisha. Her post had over 100 likes. A photo of the dining table, the one I'd left behind. Her caption read, "Sometimes people walk out dramatically when you've only ever tried to love them. But God sees hearts. The comments were worse, friends typing prayers and heart emojis, calling her strong. One person even wrote, "Take care of Mama Annie. She'll regret it later." I almost laughed. Take care of Mama Annie. If only they knew. I turned the phone off again and reached into my purse. Beneath my checkbook and old receipts was the small bronze key to my safe deposit box, the one thing Keisha never touched. My heart steadied as I traced it with my thumb. There was more to this story than they thought. That afternoon, Ms. Dolores drove me downtown to the bank. The clerk recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Lon Groove," she said softly, leading me to the vault. Inside the box were neatly folded papers, the things Keisha thought were lost or irrelevant. The deed to Noah's house, my late husband's insurance policy, and the last letter my husband had written before he passed, the one where he said, "Whatever happens, make sure your name never leaves what's yours." I sat there a long time, reading and rereading. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, like the hum of truth itself. When I walked out, I wasn't the same woman who left that house at dawn. By evening, I sat across from my lawyer, Mr. Tate. He was a calm man with an expression like iron, not cruel, just immovable. He adjusted his glasses as I handed him the documents. "I see you kept everything," he said. "I always do," I replied. He scanned the deed, his brows lifting slightly. "Mrs. Lon Groove," he said, "you do realize this house is in 3 names, yours included?" "I do now." He leaned back, nodding slowly. "And your son and his wife have been living there without compensating you, correct?" "Not even a thank you," I said. He smiled faintly, tapping his pen. "Well, if you want, we can make this official by Friday." My heart thudded. Official? As in reclaiming what's yours. Legally, cleanly, without the need for dramatics. For the first time in a long while, I exhaled deep and steady. Friday. I looked out his office window. The sun was setting, streaks of orange painting the horizon like a promise. Keisha would probably be uploading another post by now, crafting another version of the truth for strangers to consume. But I was done with her stories. It was time to write my own. As I left Mr. Tate's office, I passed my reflection in the glass door. The woman looking back wasn't broken or bitter. She was simply ready. And for the first time in months, I whispered to myself, "Let's begin." When you've been quiet long enough, people mistake your silence for surrender. But silence is where I plan my steps. That Tuesday morning, I sat at Ms. Dolores's kitchen table with a cup of tea and my checkbook open like a crime scene. Every transaction, every signature, every deposit, I traced them like a detective searching for fingerprints. Noah's handwriting was all over my accounts. His name sat beside mine on things that should have never belonged to anyone but me. Ms. Dolores looked over my shoulder. "You sure you ready to start pulling strings?" I smiled faintly. "Oh, I've already started." At 9 sharp, I called the bank. My voice softened into the tone older women use when they want to be underestimated. "Good morning, dear," I said to the young man on the line. "I need to update some authorizations on my account." He asked for verification, and I gave it without hesitation. Date of birth, address, security phrase, morning glory, the flower I planted every spring since my husband died. Once he confirmed my identity, my tone shifted just enough to mean business. "Please remove my son, Noah Longroove, as a cosigner on all checking and savings accounts associated with the Lawn Groove Trust, effective immediately. There was a pause on the other end, papers shuffling, perhaps a supervisor called over. "Ma'am, are you sure you'd like to do that?" "Yes," I said evenly. "My son's been distracted. I need control restored to its rightful owner." He didn't argue. Within minutes, it was done. I could almost feel the quiet snap of a chain breaking somewhere miles away. By noon, Noah's number started lighting up my phone. I didn't answer. Not once. Each call went to voicemail, each message a little more frantic than the last. "Ma, I don't know what's going on. Please call me." Keisha said something's wrong with the joint account. I let him speak into the void. There are some lessons you don't teach with words. You let the consequences do the talking. That evening, I logged into my online banking. Keisha's digital fingerprints were everywhere: grocery store charges, luxury spa bookings, an order for influencer lighting kits. The girl had built an image with my money, and now that well had gone dry. By Wednesday, my attorney, Mr. Tate, had filed the property reassessment paperwork. I signed the digital authorization with a pen stroke that felt cleaner than forgiveness. "Once this triggers," Mr. Tate explained, "the property will be reassessed under the Lawn Groove Trust. They'll be notified of the change in ownership control formally." "Good," I said. "I want it done by the book. Every inch of it." He nodded, adjusting his glasses. "You're reclaiming this without emotion. That's rare." I smiled. "Oh, there's emotion. It's just disciplined." That night, Ms. Dolores and I sat on her porch, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes under the streetlights. She didn't pry. She just hummed an old hymn. The kind of sound that steadies your heartbeat when you've spent too long walking on eggshells. "Dolores," I said quietly, "you ever notice how folks will smile in your face while tightening the noose?" She chuckled, low and knowing. "All the time, baby. But the good news is they always forget who tied the first knot." I slept easy for the first time in months. Meanwhile, over at that polished suburban house, the world was tilting. Keisha must have discovered the first problem at dawn. Maybe when she tried to order her morning oat milk latte and the card declined. I could almost picture it, her painted nails tapping at her phone, confusion turning to irritation. By mid-morning, the calls from her grew desperate. "Mrs. Lawn Groove." One voicemail began, her voice syrupy, performative. "I think there's been a banking mix-up. Could you please give me a call? Just a little misunderstanding." The audacity almost made me laugh. Later that evening, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Noah, shorter, colder. "Mom, did you mess with the accounts? Keisha's saying the mortgage auto-pay bounced. Can we talk before this gets out of hand?" But it was already out of hand, just not mine anymore. I ignored them both and poured myself a glass of lemonade. Some people fight wars with weapons. I preferred paperwork. By Thursday, everything was in motion. Keisha's manicured world began to crack in quiet, administrative ways. Late fees, declined cards, frozen access. The kind of chaos that doesn't explode, just tightens, slow and precise. And by that evening, while I sat rereading my husband's old letter, a ping echoed from my phone, an email confirmation. Subject, property reassessment initiated under Lawn Groove Trust. I leaned back in my chair, smiling for the first time in a long while. The game had officially begun. You can tell when a storm hits people who thought they controlled the weather. It's not the thunder that scares them. It's the silence that comes before it. By the end of that week, Noah and Keisha's perfect world had started to split along the seams. I didn't have to be there to see it. Dolores's phone did the work for me. She scrolled through the town group chat and held it up, smirking. "You might want to see this," she said. There was a video from a local restaurant, one of those trendy spots where the plates are small and the prices are big. Keisha sat there in a glittery blazer, Noah across from her, trying to look composed while the waiter whispered something to him. Then came the tight, panicked smile of a man pretending everything was fine. The caption read, "When your card declines on a $300 dinner. Phew, embarrassment." Dolores cackled. That's what social media get for always showing off. I said nothing, just took a sip of my tea and whispered, "I told him silence has consequences." By morning, the news traveled faster than wildfire. Keisha's followers started asking questions. Someone noticed her boutique store hadn't reopened since Monday. Another pointed out her website's payment gateway was under maintenance. What they didn't know was that I'd been her silent guarantor on the lease. It was my name, my credibility, that allowed her to rent that space in the first place. And when I pulled my signature, the landlord didn't waste a day. The doors were locked, and a bright orange notice hung on the window. "Lease frozen pending financial review." I watched the video someone posted of Keisha pulling on the door handle, her phone in hand. No cameras rolling for content this time. She wasn't inspirational anymore. She was just desperate. Dolores looked over at me, eyebrows raised. "You ain't gonna say nothing?" I smiled faintly. Why should I interrupt the lesson while it's working? Across town, Noah tried calling me again. His voice was softer this time when he left the voicemail. "Ma, Keisha's business is shut down. The mortgage company's been calling. I don't know what's happening. Please, can we talk?" He didn't understand yet. The thing about betrayal is it always costs more than the people who commit it expect. They thought the price was my pride. Turns out it was their stability. By Friday afternoon, they'd started fighting publicly. Another restaurant, this time a cheaper one. Keisha's voice carried across the dining room. Someone recorded it, of course. The video hit the neighborhood chat before dessert. "You said your mother would fix it," she hissed. "You said she'd calm down by now." "She will," Noah said, voice cracking. She's hurt." "Hurt? She's vindictive. Look around. Noah, we're broke. My business is gone, our accounts are frozen, and your mother's playing God." That line, "your mother's playing God," made me laugh out loud when Dolores read it aloud. I wasn't playing God. I was simply reminding them who built the ground they walked on. Still, I kept my distance. Didn't reply to his messages. Didn't pick up when he called from a new number. Every unanswered ring was another small silence he had to sit in. On Saturday, I spent the day tending to Dolores's garden. The air smelled of wet soil and redemption. I was on my knees trimming the rose bushes when I saw his shadow stretch across the yard. Noah. He looked smaller than I remembered. Eyes sunken, tie loosened, the weight of humiliation heavy on his shoulders. I stayed kneeling, clipping the last dead stem before looking up. "Ma," his voice cracked. "Can we talk?" Dolores appeared on the porch before I could answer. Her arms crossed. "She busy right now," she said flatly. He turned toward her, pleading. "Please, Miss Dolores, I just need 5 minutes." I rose slowly, brushing dirt off my hands. "You've had 33 years," I said softly. and you used them to choose someone else's comfort over my dignity. He blinked fast, words tangled behind guilt. I didn't know she'd go this far. She didn't. I cut in. You did. You gave her permission to disrespect me. Noah, every time you stayed quiet, you told her it was okay. His eyes dropped. For the first time, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who'd bring me dandelions from the yard, and say, "These are for you, Mama." But that boy was gone. Keisha had raised another man in his place. Dolores stepped closer, protective as ever. "You better head on home, son," she said. "This ain't the kind of storm you talk your way out of." Noah hesitated, then nodded weakly. "She's losing it, Ma," he said, almost whispering. "Keisha's scared." I looked him dead in the eye. "Good." He froze, searching my face for mercy, but there was none left to give. As he walked away, the sun caught the edge of his car, and for a brief second, I saw my reflection in the window, steady, deliberate, unflinching. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was correction. And the cracks in their perfect life were only beginning to spread. When Noah called again the next morning, I finally answered, not because I wanted to hear excuses, but because every war needs a moment of truth. "Ma, please," he said the instant I picked up. "Can we meet? Just talk one-on-one." His voice had that old tremor in it, the one he used as a boy whenever he broke something valuable and didn't know how to fix it. I told him to meet me at the cafe, near the courthouse, neutral ground, public enough that neither of us could raise our voices, private enough for honesty to sting. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting small in his chair, stirring coffee that had long gone cold. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. He looked like someone who'd been losing sleep, and maybe more. He stood as I approached, trying for a hug, but I sat down before he could touch me. "We'll skip the performance. Noah, you wanted to talk. So talk." He swallowed, shoulders slumping. "I didn't know about any of it, Ma. I swear." Keisha handled the accounts. "I just signed where she told me to. I thought you wanted her to manage things while you recovered from your stroke." That word, stroke, felt like a slap. Convenient memory, that one. I leaned back and studied him, the same way I used to when he lied about doing his homework. "So you're saying you had no idea your name was tied to my accounts, my savings, my property?" He shook his head quickly. "No. I mean, I knew my name was there, but it was for emergencies. Keisha said it was just paperwork stuff." I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. Cream-colored, embossed with the bank's logo. His eyes followed it like a guilty child watching a belt come off a loop. "Open it," I said. He hesitated, then flipped it open. Inside were copies, clean, dated, stamped, of every authorization form I'd requested from the bank. Each one carried his signature, each one neatly tied to transactions, transfers, and shared access he claimed not to know about. "You said you didn't know," I said softly, "but your pen did." He stared at the papers, lips parting, no words coming. I could see it happening in real time, the collapse of every lie he'd told himself. "Ma, she told me you wanted—" "Stop." My voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut through his excuses. "You don't get to hide behind her skirts like a boy anymore. You're a man, Noah. You signed away my trust with your own hand." The air between us thickened. Outside the window, the world kept moving, cars chatter, life, but inside that cafe, time felt frozen. Then his phone rang. "Keisha." He ignored it once. Twice. On the third ring, he answered because weakness always answers when manipulation calls. "Where are you?" she snapped through the speaker, her voice sharp enough for the people at the next table to turn. "I'm with my mother," Noah said, voice low. "Your mother?" Keisha's tone cracked into a scream. "Do you have any idea what she's done? My accounts are frozen, my store's locked. And now the IRS is calling about the trust reassessment. She's destroying us." "She's not destroying you," I said, loud enough for her to hear. "You're just finally seeing yourself without the shine." There was a pause on the other end, then a hiss cold and venomous. "You think this makes you powerful, old woman? You'll regret this. Both of you will." I leaned closer to the phone, my voice steady as stone. "You already regret it, Keisha. You just don't know how to say it yet." Then I ended the call. Noah sat there, trembling, eyes glassy. She's scared, Ma. She thinks you're going to take everything." I slid the folder toward him. "I'm not taking anything. Noah, I'm reclaiming what I built, what your father and I earned." He looked down, ashamed. "I didn't mean to." "I know," I interrupted. "That's the problem. You never mean to. You just let people mean for you." He flinched like the words had weight. I watched him gather himself, reaching for one last scrap of pride. "What do you want from me, Ma?" I stood, gathering my purse. Accountability. But I know better than to expect that from someone who forgot where he came from. I paused, leaning close enough for him to feel the sting in my whisper. "You forgot who taught you to sign your name." The words hung there, final and sharp. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared down at his own handwriting on the papers, as if realizing for the first time that every curve of every letter was a confession. I walked out without looking back. Outside, the sky was breaking open with light, a cruel kind of brightness that shows every flaw in the glass. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the chill. For years, I'd thought losing my son would be unbearable. But now, watching truth finally catch up to him, I realized the pain wasn't unbearable at all. It was justice taking its time. The first sign of Keisha's unraveling came not through whispers, but through headlines. By Monday morning, her face was everywhere, her beauty brand's logo plastered beside words like fraud, frozen assets, and family scandal. I didn't have to go searching for it. Ms. Dolores read it aloud from her tablet, eyebrows raised. Keisha Longroove Cosmetics under investigation after claims of unauthorized transfers tied to family trust. Lord, Annie, she's trending. Trending. What an odd word for someone's downfall. I took a slow sip of coffee, the kind that used to steady my nerves, and said, "That girl's been trending in her own lies for years. The world's just catching up." Meanwhile, social media was turning her curated empire into a feeding frenzy. Screenshots of bounced payments flooded comment sections. Former brand ambassadors posted teary videos saying they hadn't been paid in months. One caption read, "Keisha scammed her own mother-in-law and used the money to fund her fake empire." That one stayed up for hours before her publicist could delete it, but by then, screenshots had done their damage. I knew what public humiliation felt like. I'd lived it quietly when my husband died, and the world moved on without asking how I was surviving. But Keisha, she was tasting it for the first time, and it was burning her from the inside out. Later that week, Noah called again. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been yelling or crying, or both. "Ma, it's bad. Real bad. She's losing everything. Investors are pulling out. clients demanding refunds. She says people are calling her a thief. And what do you call her? I asked. He hesitated. Silence stretched. I didn't know about the debts. He finally said, his tone cracking. She took loans against the house, used the business as collateral. I thought the trust money was helping us build something real. I didn't know she was drowning us in it. It was strange hearing the truth from him. Not out of courage, but from collapse. People don't confess when they find morals. They confess when they lose options. At Dolores's kitchen table, I watched the rain streak down the window while he spoke. He sounded smaller this time. She's saying you ruined her, that you took everything from her. I stared at the raindrops sliding down the glass, slow and inevitable. Funny, I murmured. I thought she ruined herself the moment she mistook greed for inheritance. Across town, the fallout grew louder. Local blogs were digging into her past. A fake charity fundraiser, unpaid taxes, a string of bounce checks hidden under her accountant's rug. Someone leaked her email thread with a former business partner, her bragging about leveraging the old woman's assets. By evening, her followers turned on her. Hashtags that once praised her empowerment now mocked her. The empire she'd built on borrowed shine began crumbling like pressed powder in the rain. Noah tried to contain it, deleting posts calling lawyers, but you can't clean up rot when it's already in the foundation. 2 days later, I sat across from Mr. Tate in his office. The man had that calm, measured way of speaking that could make even chaos sound like arithmetic. Mrs. Longroove, he said, sliding a document across the desk, based on the accounts and loan structures, if we pursue the property reassessment, the house itself may fall into foreclosure. It's under both their names, but technically, your portion gives you leverage. Leverage, I repeated. That's another word for mercy, isn't it? He smiled faintly. Depends on how you use it. You've got every legal right to take it all back. The question is, how far do you want this to go? I looked down at the deed in front of me, the same house where I'd spent years watching my son and his wife turn my generosity into entitlement, where they'd hosted dinner parties while I sat alone at my own kitchen table. There was a quiet satisfaction in seeing the scales of justice tilt. Yet, under that, something heavier lingered. This wasn't victory. It was the price of allowing love to go unchecked. I'll think about it, I told him finally. Outside the office, the city buzzed with its usual noise, but it felt distant, muted. On my walk back to Dolores's, I passed a group of women on the corner talking loud and fast, phones in their hands. Did you see the video? Keisha crying online. One of them said, she's saying her own mother. In-law set her up. The other laughed. Girl, please. That woman's been setting herself up since she learned how to spell luxury. I kept walking. Their laughter faded behind me. By the time I reached Dolores's porch, my phone buzzed again, Mr. Tate's name flashing on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Longroove, he said, his tone clipped but calm. Just an update. If you decide to move forward, the reassessment could trigger foreclosure proceedings on their property by the end of the quarter. Foreclosure. Such a cold word for poetic justice. I looked out over the neighborhood, at the evening settling in like a hush after a storm. Thank you, Mr. Tate, I said quietly. Let me know when the papers are ready. As I hung up, the streetlights flickered on one by one. Somewhere in that glow, I imagined Keisha staring into a cracked mirror, watching the reflection of a woman who once thought money could buy class. And I couldn't help but wonder How does a person rebuild when the truth finally bankrupts them? It started with a letter I almost didn't open. It came tucked inside a pile of old files Mr. Tate sent back to me, a thick envelope marked archived documents. I thought it was just closing paperwork from years ago, relics of a past life I'd already buried. But when I pulled out the contents, I saw my own name staring back at me, only it wasn't my handwriting. Lon Groove, Annette M., signed neatly across the bottom of a loan agreement, dated 2 years before I sold my old home. My chest tightened. I hadn't signed that. The document showed a loan, $125,000, secured against the equity of my old house. The same house I'd lived in for 35 years before I moved in with Noah. The loan had been paid off quietly just before the sale. But not by me. I sat there for a long moment, my coffee untouched, the weight of realization settling like ice in my veins. I dialed Mr. Tate immediately. "Can you come by my place?" I asked. "There's something I need you to see." When he arrived that afternoon, I slid the paper across the table. He put on his glasses, brows knitting as he scanned the signature line. Then he leaned back, exhaling. "This isn't your hand, Mrs. Lon Groove. Whoever did this knew how to mimic your cursive, but not the pressure pattern. Look here, this loop in the A, too smooth, too deliberate. Can you trace who filed it?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I already have my suspicions. Let me make a few calls." While he stepped outside, I just sat there staring at that signature. My name used like a stolen key. Every letter of it felt like a bruise. I thought back to all those evenings I'd trusted Keisha to handle paperwork for Noah's business, to streamline the family finances, as she called it. I remembered the times she'd hovered too closely when I signed routine documents. By the time Mr. Tate came back in, his face said everything. It was filed through Keisha's management company. He said quietly, "Her name doesn't appear on the document, but the broker she used does, someone we've seen connected to her before." I checked the repayment trail. The funds came from her business account. So she took the loan, used my house as collateral, then paid it off before the sale to hide the evidence. He nodded grimly. "That's what it looks like. It's forgery, Annie. A serious offense." The room went still. I'd thought I'd seen every form of betrayal a woman could endure, being lied to, dismissed, pushed aside. But there's something particularly violent about someone stealing your name. It's like they crawled under your skin, wore your history like a costume, and dared to call it love. Mr. Tate's voice broke my thoughts. "We can press charges. You have the evidence. The forgery alone is enough to open a criminal case. If we proceed, it'll go public." Public. The word echoed. I could already imagine the news feeds lighting up again. Keisha's face plastered across headlines. Noah dragged along with her. I pressed my hands together, fingers trembling slightly. "And if we don't?" He shrugged. "Then it dies in silence. She walks away from this part clean. Maybe she rebuilds. Maybe she doesn't. But it ends there." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me like the humid air before a storm. I told myself I wanted peace, that all I sought was to reclaim what was mine and move on. But now, with that letter sitting between us, a symbol of how far she'd gone, I realized peace was the last thing I wanted. Not yet. I wanted her to feel it, not just lose money or reputation or comfort. I wanted her to feel the crawling panic of knowing she couldn't charm her way out this time. the suffocating dread of watching the walls close in, realizing the person she thought was too weak to fight back had been watching all along. Mrs. Longroove. Mr. Tate's voice softened. Do you want to proceed? For a long moment, I said nothing. The rain began tapping softly against the window, slow and rhythmic, like a clock counting down. Then, finally, I spoke. I want her to face it. I said quietly, no more saving her from herself. Mr. Tate nodded once. Then I'll draft the complaint. We'll start by filing the forgery report and freezing her access to the trust archives. I'll keep you updated as it moves forward. He gathered the documents, but I stopped him, keeping that forged page beneath my hand. I wanted to hold it a little longer, to remind myself what betrayal looks like when it's dressed as handwriting. After he left, I sat there alone, the letter still spread across the table. The lamp light flickered against my name, the false version of it, and for a strange moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Then I folded it neatly, slid it back into its envelope, and whispered to the quiet room. No, she needs to feel it, not escape it. When you've been underestimated long enough, silence becomes your sharpest weapon. That week, I put my years of quiet observation to use. Keisha had built her image on performance, curated smiles, philanthropic posts, brand partnerships that made her look like royalty. But behind every glossy photo, there was paperwork. Paperwork she'd never imagined I still had access to. It started with a USB drive. I kept copies of every document Mr. Tate uncovered, loan agreements, forged signatures, trust filings, payment histories. Late one night, I sat at Ms. Dolores's kitchen table and transferred just enough onto a fresh drive. Not the whole story, just the parts that looked incriminating enough to ignite whispers. Then, early Monday morning, I mailed 3 plain envelopes to 3 different addresses, one to a local business journal, one to Keisha's largest investor, and one to the regional office of the very brand that had once sponsored her. No return address, just a note. You should see what's under Longroove management. By Wednesday, the storm began. At breakfast, Dolores flipped her tablet around to show me a headline. Influencer under fire for financial misrepresentation. Source claims misused family funds. There was a photo of Keisha smiling in that fake, polished way she always did, standing beside a table of products with her company's logo behind her. I could almost hear the tightness in her voice from the picture. Controlled, desperate. I didn't smile. I just stirred my tea. The next 48 hours unfolded like dominoes tipping one after another. One of her business partners demanded an internal audit. Her brand deal temporarily paused. Someone at her office leaked a recording, Keisha berating an employee for not covering her tracks. Within hours, it hit the blogs. Meanwhile, at Noah's firm, the whispers started. A client forwarded him the same article with a single line. Is this your wife? He didn't reply. He didn't even go to the office the next day. He called me twice that week. I didn't answer. Dolores asked if I felt bad about it all, watching them unravel like this. I told her the truth. I don't feel bad. I said, I feel balance. Because that's what it was. Balance being restored. I wasn't exposing them out of spite. I was letting the world see who they really were, stripped of filters and practice charm. Thursday night, Keisha went live on her page. I watched from Dolores's iPad. Her eyes were red, makeup smudged, voice shaking as she said, "There are lies being spread about me by people who can't stand to see a woman succeed." Behind her, the house looked different, emptier, like they'd been selling off furniture to stay afloat. I almost pitied her again. Almost. Because the more she talked, the clearer it became that she wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even scared of the truth, just of losing control over how the truth was told. That's the kind of woman Keisha had always been. But what truly sealed her fate came 2 days later. The local news station ran a segment titled Family Finances and Fraud, the Lawn Groove Case. It wasn't about me directly, but they'd pieced together enough from anonymous documents to paint a damning picture. The anchor read off figures, property transfers, trust accounts, things no outsider should have known. When they flashed an image of Noah walking to his car, reporters calling after him, I turned off the television. It was enough. That night, as I sat in the quiet, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message. You ruined me. Are you happy now? I stared at it for a long moment. There was no name, but I didn't need one. I could almost hear her voice, sharp, trembling, dripping with the same arrogance that once filled that dining room when she said, even on her worst day, my mother is better than you. I thought about replying, something cutting, something final. But instead, I turned the phone face down and let the silence answer her. I wasn't happy. Happiness had nothing to do with it. This wasn't about joy. It was about justice, the kind that doesn't ask for applause or closure. I walked to the window. The night air was cool, the street quiet. Across town, the Lawn Groove name was unraveling online. Hashtags, gossip threads, the public dissection of a woman who'd built her empire on other people's pain. Dolores called from the hallway. Annie, you good? I nodded without turning around. I'm good, Dolores. I'm just watching the truth make its way home. The phone buzzed again. Same number. This time, I didn't even look. I just powered it off. Because the moment she realized she couldn't control the narrative anymore, that was the real victory. You can tell a lot about people by how they fall apart. Some do it quietly. Some perform it like theater. Keisha's collapse was televised in real time. By the end of that week, Noah had moved out. I heard through Dolores, her cousin worked at the leasing office downtown, that he'd rented a one-bedroom apartment for space. Keisha, of course, spun the story differently. She went online, tear-streaked and trembling, saying she was taking time to heal from betrayal. She didn't name Noah, but she didn't have to. The camera lingered on her empty living room, the same one that once held luxury furniture and soft, glowing lights. Now, stripped bare, it looked like a confession in progress. I watched that clip once, just once. Then I closed my laptop and went back to sorting the checks from my trust fund's recent transfers. For the first time in months, I wasn't moving money to protect myself. I was moving it to help others. I'd contacted the director of a women's shelter across town, a quiet brick building tucked between two old churches. The women there didn't know my story, and I didn't need them to. I just told them I was making a private donation in honor of every woman who'd been dismissed, underestimated, or robbed of her peace. The director cried when she saw the amount. I didn't. I just told her, make sure they have somewhere safe to land. That small act, maybe it was selfish, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in a while. Control that wasn't vengeful. Balance that didn't require someone else's suffering. But peace doesn't come easy, not when you've shaken up people who've built their lives on manipulation. Saturday afternoon, Keisha's mother showed up at Dolores's porch. She didn't call ahead, didn't knock gently. She just stomped up those steps like a storm in heels. Dolores opened the door first and froze. "I'm here to see her," the woman said, her tone sharp as glass. I came to the door slowly. She looked different up close, tired, makeup cracking under the weight of too many sleepless nights. "You think you're proud of yourself," she snapped before I could even speak. "You destroyed my daughter. Her business, her marriage, her name. She's in therapy because of you." I folded my hands calmly. Then maybe therapy will help her find the conscience she misplaced. Her eyes widened. "You're cruel, old and bitter. Evil, that's what you are." That word hung in the air like smoke. I let it sit there a moment before I spoke. "Justice is not evil," I said quietly. "It just feels that way when it finally reaches people who never thought they'd face it." She stared at me, trembling with rage, before spitting out, "You'll get what's coming," and stormed off the porch. Dolores started to say something, but I raised my hand. "Let her go. She's protecting the daughter she created." That night, the house was unusually still. Dolores had gone to her prayer group meeting, and I was left alone with the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the old wall clock. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of it all, the plotting, the calls, the silence. I wasn't young anymore. My body reminded me of that every time the air changed. I'd told myself revenge had given me back my strength, but as I sat there, my chest began to feel tight. A pressure, faint at first, then spreading. I tried to stand, but my legs wobbled. My breath came shallow, uneven. I reached for the phone, but my fingers slipped. The cup shattered on the floor, tea spreading like a dark stain. My vision blurred. I sank into the nearest chair, my body trembling. For a moment, everything around me seemed distant. The sound of traffic outside, the faint chirp of a night bird, the whisper of rain against the window. I clutched the armrest, forcing my breath steady. Not like this, I thought. Not when there's still more to finish. It took nearly an hour before the spell eased. By the time Dolores came home, I was half asleep, pale, and drenched in sweat. She rushed to my side, panic in her voice. "Annie, what happened?" "Just tired," I managed, but she saw the truth in my face, the way my hands trembled, the way my breath hitched. She called the doctor that night. They said it might have been stress, maybe blood pressure. But deep down, I knew it was something heavier. A warning, maybe. As I lay there, listening to the rain, one thought looped in my mind like a whisper I couldn't silence. When you spend too long fighting darkness, even justice can drain the light out of you. Hospitals have a way of making even the strongest feel small. The white walls, the faint antiseptic smell, the steady beeping of monitors. It all humbles you, strips you of everything you used to hide from yourself. I woke to the soft sound of a nurse adjusting the 4-line. My throat was dry, my body heavy, but my mind wouldn't rest. The room felt too quiet, like silence itself was waiting for me to admit something. Dolores sat by the window, her Bible open but unread. She glanced at me when she realized I was awake. "Morning, Annie," she said softly, closing the book. "You gave us a scare." I tried to smile, but my lips barely moved. Guess I finally slowed down long enough for my heart to notice. She shook her head. "You've been running on fire for months. It had to catch up." I turned away, staring at the reflection in the window, the pale woman in the hospital gown, her hair pressed flat, her eyes carrying more ghosts than rest. I almost didn't recognize her. Dolores came closer, her voice quiet but steady. You know, I've stood by you through all of this. Lord knows I have. But, Annie, don't confuse punishment with peace. Her words hit like a slow echo. I didn't do this to punish them. I murmured. Didn't you? She asked, folding her arms. You wanted them to feel what they made you feel. But pain ain't balance. Annie, it's just pain passed around. I looked back at the window. Outside, a nurse pushed a cart down the hall, her shoes squeaking with every step. You think I went too far? I think, she said, sitting on the edge of the bed, you've carried too much for too long. And maybe what you really wanted wasn't revenge, it was acknowledgement. You wanted them to see you. The truth of that stung more than I wanted to admit, because she was right. I didn't want to destroy Noah or Keisha. I just wanted them to understand what they'd done to me, to my home, to everything I built from nothing. Hours passed like fog. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting tubes, writing notes on clipboards. But every time the door opened, I found myself looking up, expecting someone else. He came late in the afternoon. Noah looked smaller than I remembered. Eyes red, shirt wrinkled, guilt sitting on him like a second skin. He hesitated by the doorway before stepping in. Ma. His voice cracked on the word. I tried to sit up, but the nurse's warning echoed in my head, so I just motioned for him to come closer. He stood at the foot of my bed for a moment, then finally sank into the chair beside me. I don't even know where to start, he said, rubbing his palms together. Everything's falling apart. Keisha's company's gone. People talk. I lost friends, clients, and all I keep thinking is, what have I done? His voice broke, and he covered his face with his hands. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the oxygen machine. When he finally looked up, his eyes were full of something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Remorse. Real, unguarded, painful remorse. Ma, I was stupid. I let her control everything. I thought you'd always be there no matter what. I don't know how to fix this. I reached out slowly, my hand trembling as it found his. His skin was warm, his grip hesitant. You can't fix the past, Noah, I said quietly, but you can face it. Own it. That's where it starts. He nodded, tears streaking his face. Do you still love me? After everything? That question landed like a weight in my chest. I studied his face, the same boy who used to run to me when storms scared him, the man who turned away when money blinded him. I never stopped. I whispered, but love doesn't mean I'll protect you from the lessons you need to learn. He pressed his forehead to my hand, his shoulders shaking. I didn't cry. I'd already shed my tears long before this day, but something inside me softened, a quiet loosening of the grip I'd held for too long. Dolores peeked in a few minutes later and quietly stepped back out when she saw us. The moment didn't need witnesses. Noah stayed until the sky outside turned gray-blue, and the nurse came to adjust my four. When he left, he kissed my forehead and said, I'll make it right. I wanted to believe him. Maybe this time I did. When the door closed, the silence returned, heavier now but gentler. I turned back toward the window, my reflection still faint in the glass. I almost smiled at the woman, staring back. She looked tired, yes, but she also looked freer. Just as I was drifting towards sleep, the door creaked open again. Soft heels clicked against the tile floor. I thought it was a nurse until I heard the perfume, that sharp, familiar scent. When I opened my eyes, there she was, Keisha, standing at the foot of my hospital bed, clutching her purse like a shield. The light in my hospital room was soft that morning, gray clouds stretching over the window, a hush in the air that felt almost rehearsed. I'd been expecting her. When you've lived long enough, you learn that guilt has a sound. It always circles back, sooner or later, wearing perfume and shaking hands. Keisha stood at the foot of my bed, her once perfect posture now folded into itself. The woman who used to glide into rooms like she owned them was now trembling, her lipstick uneven, her eyes swollen. For the first time, she looked human. She didn't speak at first, just stared, clutching her purse like she was holding on to her last defense. "You can sit," I said, finally, my voice calm, almost distant. She hesitated, then obeyed, lowering herself onto the chair beside my bed. The silence between us was a living thing, thick, charged, restless. "I shouldn't have come," she said softly, voice breaking. "But I had to. I couldn't sleep anymore. I keep seeing your face every time I close my eyes." I didn't answer. The monitors hummed quietly behind me. She took a shaky breath. "I did things I'm ashamed of. Things I told myself were harmless at first. I thought," she swallowed hard, "I thought you were judging me. Always. The way you'd look at me when Noah brought me around. I felt like I was never enough for him, for this family, for you." "You weren't," I said simply. Her lips parted, stunned by the honesty. I didn't say it cruelly, it was just truth. Tears slid down her face, quick and ungraceful. "I know. And instead of trying to be better, I tried to outshine you. Every dinner, every decision, I kept thinking if I could just be more than you, maybe Noah would love me the way he loved you." She leaned forward, her voice trembling. "But it was never about money. It was about control. I thought if I could take what you built, I'd finally prove I belonged." I studied her, the desperation, the cracks that no filter or foundation could hide now. "And what did you prove, Keisha?" Her breath caught. "That I'm nothing without what I took." For the first time since she entered, I turned fully toward her.